looking to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
You're watching ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. We're coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam. Hello, Charlene.
Hello, I'm Charlene Navaja, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
Unang-una sa lahat,
Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles said the government is hoping for a peaceful resolution of the Ukraine crisis. However, he said President Duterte has prepared for, quote, any eventualities.
makapaghanap po ng
The Philippines' top diplomat in Hong Kong said Tuesday it was illegal and immoral for residents to fire and turf out domestic workers who test positive for the coronavirus as the Chinese city endures its worst outbreak yet.
And the Philippines has proposed to the governments of South Korea and Japan to set up special visitor lanes for fully vaccinated leisure travelers to and from these countries.
The youthful atmosphere.
And I bet you can't eat just one. Let's meet the Filipino owner of the I Love Chips in Australia.
Also barbecue and
Now to the news. Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles said the government is hoping for a peaceful resolution on the Ukraine crisis. However, he said President Duterte has already prepared for, quote, any eventualities. Let's listen in.
yung mga unang-una sa lahat, syempre we hope that all parties will explore all avenues. Sana po ay makapaghanap po tayo lahat, no, dito sa buong mundo, makapaghanap po ng mabuting avenues para matagumpay nating marating ang kapayapaan. That being said, your government and our President, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, has been preparing for any and all eventualities and all contingencies ay pinaghahandaan na po ng inyong pamahalaan. The President and your government is preparing for any and all eventualities and any and all contingencies are being prepared. Kasama't kabilang sa kinakausap ni Pangulo yung mga kagawaran na directly involved at that will be directly involved for any and all eventualities and contingencies. No? Kabilang na dyan ang Department of Transportation, kabilang na rin po dyan yung Department of Energy. And of course, our Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday announced tough new sanctions on Russia for beginning an invasion of Ukraine, but said there was still time to avoid war, even as Vladimir Putin signaled plans to send troops beyond Russia's borders. Russia's upper house, the Federation Council, gave President Putin unanimous approval to deploy peacekeepers to two breakaway Ukrainian regions now recognized by Moscow as independent and potentially into other parts of Ukraine.
This is the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, as he indicated and asked permission to be able to do from his Duma. So let's begin to, I'm going to begin to impose sanctions in response far beyond the steps we and our allies and partners implemented in 2014. We're implementing full blocking sanctions on two large Russian financial institutions, VEB and their military bank. We're implementing comprehensive sanctions on Russian sovereign debt. That means we've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West and cannot trade in its new debt on our markets or European markets either. Starting tomorrow and continuing in the days ahead, we'll also impose sanctions on Russia's elites and their family members.
Meanwhile, President Putin's plans remained unclear, but Western officials have been warning for weeks. He has been preparing an all-out invasion of Ukraine, a move that could spark a catastrophic war in Europe. President Biden said in his White House address the United States would continue to supply defensive weapons to Ukraine and deploy more U.S. troops to reinforce NATO allies in Eastern Europe. After a dramatic televised meeting with his top officials, President Putin spoke to the Russian people in an often angry hour-long address from his Kremlin office. He railed against Ukraine as a puppet of the West, accusing Kiev of preparing a blitzkrieg to retake the separatist regions. Take a look.
В документах НАТО наша страна официально, прямо объявлена главной угрозой евроатлантической безопасности. И в качестве передового плацдарма для такого удара будет служить Украина. Хочу четко, прямо сказать, в сложившейся ситуации, когда наши предложения о равноправном диалоге по принципиальным вопросам фактически остались без ответа со стороны США и НАТО, когда уровень угроз для нашей страны значительно возрастает, Россия имеет полное право принимать ответные меры обеспечения собственной безопасности. Самым лучшим решением этого вопроса было бы, чтобы наши коллеги в западных странах не теряли, что называется, лица, чтобы сегодняшние киевские власти сами отказались от вступления в НАТО. По сути, реализовали бы идею нейтралитета.
The Russian leader has repeatedly said Moscow seeks legal guarantees from the West that Ukraine will not become a NATO launch pad and criticized U.S.-led military exercises in the Black Sea. Moscow wants to see an end to NATO's eastward expansion after much of Eastern Europe joined the alliance following the collapse of the Soviet Union. President Putin has accused the West of ignoring Russia's red lines by holding drills in the Black Sea and sending Kiev modern weaponry, demanding legal guarantees that NATO would not expand eastwards. In other news, Myanmar had hit out at a genocide case brought against it by the Gambia for alleged persecution of Rohingya Muslims, urging the UN's High Court to drop the claim on legal grounds. Banjul dragged Myanmar before the International Court of Justice in 2019, accusing the predominantly Buddhist Myanmar of genocide against the Rohingya minority over a bloody 2017 military crackdown. Take a look.
In arguing that the court lacks jurisdiction or that the case is inadmissible, Myanmar is therefore not thereby seeking to impede the judicial process of the court. On the contrary, it's seeking to ensure the proper administration of justice.
Myanmar contends that the relevant facts are clear. As to the law, it cannot be possible for an international organization to bring a case before the court by using a state as proxy applicant. The Gambia has provided no substantive response to that contention. This may be the first case in which this issue has arisen. But depending on what the court decides, it may be far from the last. This case will set an important precedent.
When the case opened in December 2019, Aung San Suu Kyi personally represented Myanmar's case at the Hague-based ICJ. But she was ousted as the Asian country's civilian leader in a military coup last year. The Nobel Peace Laureate, who faced criticism from rights groups for her involvement in the case, is now under house arrest and on trial by the same general she defended in The Hague. Christopher Staker, another lawyer for Myanmar, said the ICJ didn't have the jurisdiction because it was not a case brought by two states as required by the ICJ statutes. He accused the Gambia of not acting in its own right, but stepping in on behalf of the OIC, referring to the 57-member body that was set up in 1969 to represent global Muslim interests. Gambia will make its counter-arguments on Wednesday. Around 850,000 Rohingya are languishing in camps in neighboring Bangladesh, while another 600,000 Rohingya remain in Myanmar's southwestern Rakhine state. The Philippines' top diplomat in Hong Kong said it was illegal and immoral for residents to fire and turf out domestic workers who test positive for COVID-19 as the Chinese city endures its worst outbreak yet. Consul General Rally Tejada said the mission had helped 31 Filipinos who sought its help for hospitalization or access to isolation rooms, adding 61 in all had tested positive. Let's listen in.
Ayon po sa Hong Kong law, sa employment ordinance po ng Hong Kong, napakabawal po. It constitutes illegal dismissal po, lalo na kapag ang empleyado ay may sakit. Bawal na bawal po na i-terminate ng kanilang mga employer ito.
In Hong Kong, foreign domestic workers must live with their employers, cannot swap jobs easily, and are entitled to 1 day off a week. Last week, a coalition of Hong Kong groups representing migrant workers alleged that some found themselves denied treatment at hospitals because they had lost their jobs. Activists said many Hong Kong employers were refusing to let their domestic workers leave, often cramped apartments even on their day off, while some had been fired for taking their rest day. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam told residents Friday to encourage helpers to stay indoors and said police would step up social distancing fines. Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello III reported that through its aftercare financial assistance program, the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, through the Philippine Overseas Labor Office, or POLO, Hong Kong initially provided $200 to qualified OFWs. He also added that an additional $200 was given to OFWs with concerns regarding quarantine facilities. The POLO is also helping in transporting infected OFWs to quarantine isolation facilities if needed, to hospitals in view of the current shortage in available ambulances, in coordination with the Hong Kong Center for Health Protection and non-government organizations. The Philippine government will not impose a travel ban on overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, returning from Hong Kong, even as the Special Administrative Region of China is battling its fifth COVID-19 wave, according to Malacanang. Let's listen in.
No decision on that matter yet as of the moment. We just must ensure that lahat ng ating mga kababayang OFW na pupunta sa ibang lugar, kailangan fully vaccinated po. Yan po pinakamabisang paraan para ma-assure natin yung kanilang full protection.
Kung maaari po sana, wag po sana mag-ban ng pagpapauwi ng ating mga Pilipino sa Pilipinas, sapagkat marami pa rin pong mga kababayan natin ang patuloy na umuwi galing Hong Kong papuntang Pilipinas. But of course, that is a decision that I leave to our experts and our superiors in Manila. But of course, due to the also visa restrictions, hindi rin po makapunta rito ang mga Filipino. At these things are things that need to be assessed and discussed by our superiors in Manila. But patuloy pa rin kasi po ang pag-uwi ng ating mga kababayan sa Pilipinas. As we speak, meron po pa rin flights na pumupuntang Pilipinas. Ngunit ang ban po ngayon ay yung Hong Kong wala Pilipinas papuntang Hong Kong. So, recapping, nasa Pilipinas na po ang desisyon kung sa ganyang kanun.
Tayo, ang policy talaga natin sa bansang Pilipinas, lahat ng Pilipinong gustong umuwi ay papayagan po nating umuwi sa bansang Pilipinas.
UN Security Council members China and Russia, as well as Serbia, have continued supplying Myanmar's junta with weapons used to attack civilians since last year's coup, a UN rights expert said Tuesday. United Nations Special Rapporteur on the rights situation in Myanmar, Tom Andrews, urged the Security Council to convene an emergency session to debate and vote on a resolution to, at a minimum, ban those arms transfer that Myanmar military are known to use to attack and kill Myanmar civilians. He released a long-awaited report Tuesday detailing where the junta is getting its weapons from, highlighting that two permanent members of the Security Council itself, who hold veto power over its decisions, remain among the main suppliers. During this same period, Serbia has authorized rockets and artillery for export to Myanmar military, said Andrews, who is an independent expert appointed by the UN Human Rights Council, but who does not speak on behalf of the world body. In his report, he maintained that the arms transfers by three countries had occurred with full knowledge that they would be used to attack civilians, in probable violation of international law. He also reiterated in his report that there is strong evidence that junta has committed war crimes and crimes against humanity, including murder, sexual violence, and torture. In Malaysia now, where Senior Defense Minister Datuk Seri Hishamuddin Tun Hussein is undergoing isolation at Hospital Angkatan Tentera Tuanku Mizan, here for treatment and observation after testing positive for COVID-19 yesterday. Hishamuddin, in a Twitter post today, said his health condition was good, although he was showing symptoms. He thanked all those who prayed for his recovery. According to Bernama News, the office of the Senior Defense Minister, in a statement yesterday, said Hishamuddin, who had received his booster dose, was confirmed positive for COVID-19 and was undergoing quarantine as required by the Health Ministry. The statement said Hishamuddin would continue to perform his duties as appropriate throughout this period. The Health Ministry reported 27,179 new COVID-19 infections in the last 24 hours, an increase from 25,099 cases the day before. This brings the cumulative infections to 3,273,958 from the time COVID-19 arrived in the country in 2020. Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah said in a statement today. The latest number of people who recovered stood at 19,037, raising the cumulative recovered cases to 2,974,441. Deaths reported yesterday showed the same rate at 43, with 13 brought in dead. As of today, a total 32,433 people have died of the COVID since the start of the pandemic. The Philippines has proposed to the governments of South Korea and Japan to set up special visitor lanes for fully vaccinated leisure travelers to and from these countries. This was confirmed by Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat in a Viber message to the Business Mirror. Romulo Puyat will be leaving for South Korea and Japan this Friday to meet with their respective travel trade groups in a bid to reopen tourism traffic with the Philippines. She said, and I quote, "We are meeting with the biggest media partners, tour operators, travel associations, and presenting the reopening of the Philippines, and to personally invite them to the WTTC Global Summit." The World Travel and Tourism Council Global Summit will be held in Manila this April 20 to 2022. April 20 to 22 this year. And the DOT expects to gather some 600 international delegates. This will include CEOs of the largest and most prominent international travel and tourism companies, from airlines, hotels, and resorts, travel agencies, tour companies, global distribution system, transportation, and allied enterprises, as well as tourism ministers and officials from international organizations such as the United Nations World Tourism Organization.
Vietnamese President Nguyen Xuan Phuc will make a state visit to Singapore from February 24 to the 26th at the invitation of the Singaporean counterpart, Halima Yacob. Vietnam and Singapore established diplomatic relations on August 1, 1973 and elevated the bilateral ties to strategic partnership in 2013. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the two countries have maintained exchanges and contacts. The two-way trade soared by 23.3% to $8.3 billion last year and reached $783.9 million in January this year. Remarkably, Singapore was the largest investor in Vietnam last year, with a total investment capital valued at $10.7 billion, making up 34.4% of the total capital investment inflows into Vietnam. Currently, Vietnamese and Singaporean airlines have resumed regular commercial flights with a frequency of operations of 14 round trips per week. And we'll be back with more news from the ASEAN region. Charlene and I will be back. Stay tuned.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo.
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
Ngayong linggo, itigil muna ang mga gawaing bahay at manood ng Tara Game agad-agad kasama ang mga mahal nating Tara Gamers na kasambahay. So pag nakuha mo yung 100,000, anong unang-una mong gagawin?
Papagamot ko po yung tatay ko. Mayroon po akong pinapaaral ng mga anak. 3 po sila.
Isa kaya sa kanila ay maswerteng mag-uuwi ng 100,000 pesos? Alas 7 ng gabi, dito lang sa Net 25.
Welcome back. Philippine Navy Chief Vice Admiral Adelius Bordado thanked U.S. 7th Fleet Commander Vice Admiral Carl Thomas for his support for a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Bordado made this pronouncement during Thomas's courtesy call to the Philippine Navy headquarters in Rojas Boulevard, Manila, Tuesday afternoon. In a statement on Wednesday, Philippine Navy Public Affairs Office Chief Commander Benjo Negranza said the two naval leaders reaffirmed both navies' enduring relationship and cooperation. Thomas said good high-level discussions such as courtesy calls are some of the things that we can do together to try to improve the interoperability and improve strong alliance. Thomas's visit is among the routine interactions between the Philippine Navy and its U.S. counterpart that greatly contribute to the sustainment and furtherance of bilateral relations between Manila and Washington, D.C. The U.S. 7th Fleet is the largest of the U.S. Navy's forward deployment fleet, maintaining a continuous forward presence in the Indo-Pacific region. Its area of operations covers more than 36.1 million square nautical miles, spanning from the international dateline to the India-Pakistan border and from the Kuril Islands in the north to the Antarctic in the south. This encompasses 36 maritime countries and 5 mutual defense treaty allies, namely Australia, South Korea, Japan, Thailand, and the Philippines. Japanese Ambassador to the Philippines, Koshikawa Kazuhiko, and National Food Authority Administrator Judy Carol Dansal welcomed the arrival of 300 metric tons of Japanese rice under the ASEAN Plus 3 Emergency Rice Reserve or APTER initiative at the NFA warehouse in Valenzuela City on Monday. This rice will be delivered and distributed to Typhoon Odette affected families in Cebu, Bohol, and Surigao del Norte as soon as the approval by the APTER Council is given to the NFA, according to a news release yesterday. During the official inspection of the rice stocks, Ambassador Kashikawa stressed that Japan fully commits to support the Philippines' efforts to build back better from the typhoon damage. APTER is a regional cooperation that started in 2012, and it aims to strengthen food security, poverty alleviation, and malnourishment eradication among its member countries. To accomplish its common goal, the APTER parties have agreed to establish rice stocks to assist member countries in times of large-scale natural disasters. In Indonesia, President Joko Widodo has said his government is targeting to put at least 2 million metric vehicles or electric vehicles on the road by 2025. The target is 2 million electric vehicles to be used by Indonesians and will continue to the export market. This, he remarked while launching an electric vehicle ecosystem at Mount Haryono gas station, Tibet, South Jakarta on Tuesday. President Widodo said Indonesia is very serious about transitioning to the use of new renewable energy. He said the use of electrical vehicles or electric vehicles is one of the efforts to accelerate this transition. He then lauded business players who are contributing to developing the electric vehicle ecosystem, both in the upstream and downstream sectors. President Widodo affirmed that Indonesia can become an electric vehicle manufacturer and leader with the support of the electric vehicle ecosystem from upstream to downstream. To support the development of the electric vehicle industry, it's hoped that electric battery factories with a large production capacity can be completed soon in Indonesia, according to the president.
Devise a local government units or LGUs that can inoculate at least 70% of eligible adults and 80% of senior citizens from their target population. Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., the chief of implementer of the National Task Force Against COVID-19, said LGUs that can meet the vaccination coverage requirement will be placed under the most lenient alert level 1 classification, citing a similar prerequisite for the National Capital Region or NCR. Let's watch this.
So yung way forward po natin, ang ating pong way forward, we need to re-strategize and require the LGUs to vaccinate at least 70% of the eligible population and 80% of its senior population. Ito po ay gagawin po natin parang requirement or incentivize those who are having yung higher coverage, na at least pwede po silang magkaroon ng alert level 1 like in the NCR.
He noted the country has already reached an inflection point in the COVID-19 vaccination program, with the daily output reduced from 1 million to less than 500,000 doses a day. He also noted a low vaccination turnout during the third run of the Bayanihan Bakunahan national drive from February 10 to 18, with only 3.5 million individuals inoculated. There are still about 3 million senior citizens and adults with comorbidities who remained unvaccinated, according to Galvez. Thus, the National Vaccination Operations Center of the Department of Health has designated a focal person per region to capacitate LGUs that are lagging in their vaccination achievement. He said the government will expand the Res Vacuna sa Botica drive and ask more pharmacies and medical clinics nationwide to help improve the booster vaccination numbers. A memorandum of understanding on Smart Factory Development Cooperation Project between the Ministry of Industry and Trade, or MIT, and Samsung Vietnam was inked in Hanoi on Tuesday. The project targets to train 100 Vietnamese experts, as well as provide consultations and upgrade 50 businesses to apply smart factory in 2 years with a view to improving the expertise of domestic consultants and enhancing enterprises' production operation capacity based on their information technology platforms. Under the program, the consultants will be trained for 12 weeks to advance knowledge and skills for building smart factories. According to the MIT, since 2015, the ministry and Samsung have jointly launched improvement consultancy programs to upgrade competitiveness for 379 Vietnamese firms. The MIT and Samsung provided training for 406 specialists on the auxiliary industry during 2018 to 2021 and 2,000 mold technicians during 2020 to 2023. The Smart Factory Cooperation Development Project is the latest program in a series of innovative consulting activities for Vietnamese businesses and training Vietnamese experts. As economies learn to live with COVID-19 and as demand to travel is expected to make a steady comeback this year, APEC is taking the lead to pave a calibrated and measured way of reconnecting the dynamic region of the Asia-Pacific. In his address to senior officials and business leaders from 21 APEC member economies last week in an event held in Singapore, Thani Thongthakdi, Permanent Secretary for Foreign Affairs of Thailand and 2022 Chair of the APEC senior officials, underscored the need to reconnect the region to support recovery. Thailand recognizes the need to reconnect the region to support economic recovery, taking forward the recommendation of the region's business leaders to APEC leaders last year. A safe passage task force was created in order to coordinate cross-border travel resumption, Thani explained, and he also pointed out that the objective of the task force is to reopen cross-border travel safely and seamlessly in the short term while looking to expand business mobility in the longer term. Equities mostly rose Wednesday and oil prices stabilized as investors track developments in Russia-Ukraine crisis after world powers imposed less harsh sanctions on Moscow than feared. However, trading floors remain on edge after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his forces into Ukraine to secure the self-declared Donetsk and Lugansk rebel republics, with Western leaders warning that a war could break out imminently. Global markets have been in turmoil since the move this week, with oil soaring towards the $100 mark not since 2014, and other commodities also hitting multi-year highs. Wall Street, which was closed for a holiday Monday, tanked in an early trade but saw a noticeable bounce after U.S. President Joe Biden unveiled a series of sanctions against Russia. In early trade Wednesday, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Sydney, Seoul, Wellington, Taipei, and Jakarta were all in positive territory. Singapore and Manila slipped. Tokyo was closed for a holiday.
The volume of global merchandise trade may turn up soon as supply chain pressures have partially eased. That according to data released Monday by the World Trade Organization. The WTO's Goods Trade Barometer, a real-time trend gauge for trade, decreased slightly to 98.7 in December 2021 compared to 99.5 last November. The figure below the baseline value of 100 signaled a loss of momentum in trade at the start of this year, but it also showed signs of bottoming out as supply pressures eased, according to the WTO. Relaxing Omicron coronavirus variant-related restrictions is expected to boost trade in the coming months, though future variants are still risks to economic activity and trade. It said most sub-indices of the barometer were close to the value of 100, suggesting a growth trend in export orders, air freight, electronic components, and raw materials. While automotive products remain below trend, its latest index value marks a turnaround compared to recent months, which may have been helped by the return to the trend of shipments of electronic components, which include semiconductors that have been in short supply, it added. And we'll go for a break. ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Nakikiusap po ako. Maawa ka po sa kanya! Hindi ako maawa! Bakit ba? Lahat na lang nasabihin namin ay kinukontra mo! Ako, si Contraman!
Mga kasama, ito ng mga dokumento. Kailangan nating lagdaan yan. Gamit ang ating mga dugo.
Kailangan mo talagang dugo? Dugo? Pwede ka na lang.
Ang ating pong game ngayon ay pagalingan sa Tinikling!
Bago pa man ang pandemya ng COVID-19, mataas na ang pagkilala ng mga Pilipinong consumer sa responsibilidad ng mga kumpanya na tumutulong sa lipunan. But during the pandemic, we've seen more and more companies committing to such corporate social responsibility activities. What has inspired this generosity, and how can businesses get involved in building their communities? We'll find this out from our guests from JCI Manila as they share how COVID-19 is encouraging corporate social responsibility.
I believe every small act, lahat po ng kabataan, may kakayahan upang tumulong sa ating mga komunidad.
Pwede natin tignan yung pandemya na maganda rin para sa mga millennial. Kasi ngayon nabigyan na tayo ng pagsubok na yun. And susuko ba tayo? Nasa sa atin na yun. And of course, ang advice natin is, wag na wag sumuko.
All this in this episode of Open for Business.
Bida sa pelikula, sa commercials, sa game shows, sa puso mo. Pero ngayon, kayo naman ang bibida dito. Soon on Net25.
Welcome back. The birthday of His Majesty, the Emperor of Japan, is one of the most important holidays for Japanese people. Now, according to the Japanese ambassador, today they celebrate His Majesty's 62nd birthday and are inviting the people of the Philippines to share the joy of this day together. And on this special occasion, Ambassador Koshikawa is sending his message of congratulations on His Majesty's birthday and touches on the long-standing close relations between Japan and the Philippines. Let's listen in.
His Excellency President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, Honorable Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Teodoro Locsin Jr., the people of the Philippines. I share the joy of the entire Japanese people as we commemorate today the 62nd birthday of His Majesty the Emperor of Japan. This delightful occasion is even more meaningful because we are able to celebrate it with the people of the Philippines. To begin with, Typhoon Odette caused catastrophic damage to the Philippines last December. On behalf of the government of Japan, I would like to once again express my heartfelt sympathy to all those who have been affected. In the meantime, the world remains clouded by the unprecedented crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we have observed a decreasing trend in the number of infections here in the Philippines. In a prolonged fight against COVID-19, Japan has been with the Philippines every step of the way. We will strive to keep strengthening our cooperative relationship. On our path to recovery from the pandemic, we will ensure that no one will be left behind. Yet, regardless of struggles happening around us, there still lies a great deal of good news. Especially the Tokyo 2020 Olympics and Paralympics Games scored a huge success. Both the Philippine and the Japanese public were immensely inspired by the Filipino Olympians and the Paralympians, especially Ms. Heidi Diaz. Her outstanding attainment of first Olympic gold medal for the Philippines deserved my warmest congratulations once again. Turning our eyes to the situation in the Indo-Pacific region, the regional security environment is becoming more testing and uncertain at a remarkably faster speed. Given the situation, what is important is close cooperation among like-minded countries bounded by such universal values and principles as freedom, democracy, and rule of law. In particular, the sustainment of the maritime order in South China Sea is directly connected to the protecting our global commons. I believe this can only be achieved not through the force or coercion, but through the action based on the principle of the rule of law. This is why the Philippines is one of our most reliable partners, and Japan highly values the Philippines' effort to pursue the peaceful settlement of dispute on the basis of international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The Philippines' renewed commitment to the Arbitral Tribunal's award issued in 2016 is its eloquent testament. Importantly, Prime Minister Kishida reaffirmed Japan's support for the Philippines' position at the summit telephone talk held with President Duterte last November. In 2017, then Prime Minister Abe announced Japan's commitment 1 trillion yen, roughly 500 billion pesos, both government assistance and private investment, for state building of the Philippines. This pledge was fulfilled within its 5 years period, despite the challenges arising from the pandemic. The public and private financing was effectively utilized and thus created substantial results in various fields, including vitalization of the Philippine economy through the numerous big-ticket infrastructure projects and facilitation of the Mindanao peace process, the improvement of healthcare and medical system, and modernization of the Philippine Coast Guard maritime law enforcement capacity. I'm also greatly looking forward to the ongoing Metro Manila subways and North-South commuter railway project improving the living standard of the Filipinos in the near future. Our two countries have been heading over to a better future together. I say with confidence, the bond between Japan and the Philippines will continue to be immutable. I expect the Philippines will continue to regard Japan as a reliable partner. Meanwhile, it is also our sincere desire to further nurture our relations with the Philippines, a country blessed with young and talented people and thus full of potentials. I'd like to conclude my message by sincerely wishing for the continued good health of His Majesty, the Emperor of Japan, and His Excellency President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, and for the everlasting friendship between Japan and the Philippines.
The essence of the Bangsamoro woman now flies high in a recently rescued female Philippine Eagle, or the Pitikofaga Jeffrey in Lanao del Sur. The injured eagle was named Bangsa Bay by the Bangsamoro government after a resident turned it over to its environment office in Lanao del Sur. The eagle was rescued on February 9 by a concerned citizen in the province's interior town of Marugong. Environment Officer Benjamin Alanca of the Community of Environment, Natural Resources and Energy Office, or CENRIO, in Lanao del Sur, 2nd District, said Haji Sulaiman Ulama found the injured eagle and informed environmental authorities of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARM. Bangsa Bay has a wingspan of 51 centimeters and its injured right wing weighs 5 kilograms. We turned over Bangsa Bay to the Philippine Eagle Foundation in Davao City on February 12 to perform additional medical procedures. He reminded residents to turn over any wildlife animals to government and not to harm them. He said wildlife protection and conservation, as well as penalty for harming animals, is covered under Republic Act 9147, also known as the Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act. The collection, trading, hunting, and care without a proper permit is strictly prohibited, especially for critically endangered wildlife, such as the Philippine eagle. And I bet you can't eat just one. Let's meet the Filipino owner of the I Love Chips in Australia. Here's Dan David Amazona from our Australia Bureau.
The arrival of COVID-19 has taken a toll on economies across the globe. Jobs and livelihoods have been suffering ever since. However, two particular small business owners, husband and wife Ryan and Kathrina Alarcon, have dared to defy the odds. Ryan and Kathrina have created a potato fries business with the goal to bring something new, something fresh to the South Australian community. Since March 2020, this small business has taken chips fans by surprise, bringing this mouth-watering, palate-intriguing snack to residents.
So our business name is I Love Chips. From the name of our business, we love chips. And the inspiration for starting that one is we started as a food truck and we wanted to put it on a brick and mortar area because we wanted to expand our business, not only here in Adelaide, but in the other state of Australia, and hopefully we can go overseas as well. We really value customer service. That's the main thing. Because I believe that customer service and product, if you marry those two, you will have a good business.
As you step into the store, the youthful atmosphere, customer service, and food choices add to the total experience. There's a variety of chip seasonings such as, of course, the classic salt, but there's also barbecue and an out-of-the-box option, chicken salt. With this variety also comes the variety of customers frequenting this new food business.
Our business is not targeting mainly Filipinos. We didn't create this business mainly specifically for Filipinos. We created this business because we are here in Australia. We have a flavor that is generally applicable to all cultures, mainly for Australians. So we have different flavors that can cater to different people in different cultures. And also one of our popular flavors is the chicken salt. And chicken salt here is very common in Australia. So it doesn't cater to Filipinos, but to all of the generation and to all of the the people here in Australia.
As the phrase "I love chips" continues to get passed on to the people in South Australia, expansion seems inevitable.
It's really fun and it's really convenient, and we all work as a team, and it's just it's right in the middle of everything, so we get so busy and it's just fun.
So what are you trying to bring to the community?
A smile and just good customer service, and hope they really enjoy the food.
So this is a twister, and it's like a potato cut up into a coil, and you can like take pieces off it like this. It's like a chip on a stick. Super delicious. I'm definitely coming back. These are delicious.
Kathrina and Ryan Alarcon are just one of many who, instead of being paralyzed by the effects of the pandemic, use these as an opportunity to put into motion goals they've been meaning to accomplish. From Adelaide, Australia, this is Dan David Amazona, Oceania at a Glance, Eagle News.
Thank you, Dan. And thank you, Charlene, for keeping me company today here on ASEAN in Focus, as always.
Thank you also, Alma. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. I am Charlene Navarra from your Vietnam Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And we'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place, here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay in the news because we live in interesting times.